Your mind does something cruel and no one warned you about it. It doesn't archive your victories with the same intensity it tattoos your failures. You can win 10 times, survive 100 storms, climb out of holes that should have buried you, and yet one failure will sit at the center of your thoughts like it owns the place. You don't remember failure. Failure replays itself. At night, in silence, when no one is watching. Your past wins knock politely on the door of your memory, but your failures kick it down and move in like they pay rent. And the scariest part, you start believing that voice. You start thinking, if I failed once, that must be the real me. Not the version that survived, not the version that adapted, not the version that kept going, just the version that fell. That's how the mind betrays you, not by lying loudly, but by repeating the same painful truth without the full context. And over time, repetition becomes identity. This is why your past failures feel louder than your past wins, because your brain is not designed to celebrate you, it is designed to protect. Even if that protection slowly destroys your confidence, your mind is not broken, it is primitive. That's the part no one tells you. You assume your thoughts are logical, balanced, fair. They're not. Your brain was never designed to make you confident or fulfilled. It was designed to keep you alive. And survival has a dark rule. Pain must be remembered louder than pleasure. That's why one humiliation from years ago can still make your chest tighten, while 10 victories from the same period feel blurry and distant. Your brain magnifies failure because, evolutionarily, failure once meant danger. Social rejection meant exile. A wrong move meant death. So your nervous system learned to treat mistakes as emergencies. Even today, when failure only costs pride, your body reacts like your life is on the line. Heart rate spikes, muscles tense, memory sharpens, the moment burns itself into you. Success doesn't do that. Success doesn't activate survival. It doesn't demand attention. So it fades. Quietly. Unceremoniously. And here's where it gets cruel. Your brain doesn't just remember failure. It rehearses it. Over and over. Not to punish you, but to protect you. It replays what you said wrong, what you should have done, where you hesitated. It convinces you that by reliving it, you're preventing it from happening again. But repetition doesn't equal learning when it's soaked in shame. It becomes conditioning. The more you replay failure emotionally, the more your brain links action with danger. Trying becomes risky. Visibility becomes threatening. Ambition starts to feel unsafe. You don't consciously decide to shrink. Your nervous system does it for you. This is why confidence doesn't return just because time passes. Time doesn't heal what the mind keeps reopening. Every time you remember failure without reframing it, your brain treats it like it's happening now. Same emotions, same fear, same self-doubt. You are not haunted by the past. You are reliving it neurologically. Meanwhile, your wins sit unprocessed. You never emotionally register them as proof. You don't let them rewire your identity. You move past them too quickly, chasing the next goal, the next validation, the next escape from feeling not enough. So success never settles. It never becomes part of who you are. Your mind is also biased by something even more dangerous, negativity waiting. One loss outweighs 10 wins. One rejection outweighs years of acceptance. One bad decision overshadows 1,000 responsible ones. This is why failure feels honest and success feels suspicious. Failure aligns with your fear-based wiring. Success challenges it. And anything that challenges your internal narrative gets questioned. Did I really earn this? Was it just luck? Will it last? You interrogate your wins like they're lying to you. But failure gets believed immediately. No cross-examination, no defense, just a guilty verdict handed down without a trial. Over time, this imbalance trains you to mistrust yourself. You stop seeing patterns of growth and only see isolated mistakes. You forget how many times you adapted, improved, survived. You remember the one time you froze, the one time you quit, the one time you embarrassed yourself. And slowly, without realizing it, your self-image starts leaning toward that moment. Not because it's accurate, but because it's loud. Because your brain keeps turning up the volume on it. This is why telling yourself, just think positive, never works. You're not dealing with mindset, you're dealing with conditioning. Your brain learned that failure equals danger. And until that association is broken, every new opportunity will feel heavier than it should. You'll hesitate not because you're weak, but because your nervous system is trying to keep you from re-experiencing pain. The tragedy is that the same system meant to protect you is now keeping you small, and unless you confront this imbalance directly, your future will continue being negotiated by memories that no longer deserve control. All right, stay with me. This is where it cuts the deepest. Failure doesn't destroy you all at once. It moves in slowly, quietly, like a belief you didn't agree to but never challenged. At first, it's just a memory, something that happened, something you wish had gone differently. Then it becomes a reference point. You start measuring new situations against that old moment. Last time I tried, it didn't work. Then, without noticing the shift, it becomes a conclusion. This is what always happens to me. And finally, the most dangerous stage, it becomes a label. Not something you experienced, but something you were. This is how failure rewrites identity, not through trauma alone, but through repetition and neglect. The mind hates uncertainty. It craves predictability, even when the prediction is painful. So it takes your past failure and turns it into a story about your limits, your capabilities, your worth. And once a story is formed, the brain will protect it at all costs. Any success that contradicts it gets minimized. Any failure that confirms it gets amplified. You don't realize you're filtering reality. You just think you're being realistic. But realism without perspective is just pessimism wearing a mask. This is why you can improve your skills and still feel unqualified, why you can grow stronger and still feel weak. Your external progress advances, but your internal identity stays frozen at the moment of failure. You outgrow the situation, but your mind refuses to update the image it has of you. So you carry an outdated version of yourself into new rooms, new opportunities, new chapters, and that version keeps whispering, "Don't forget what happened last time," as if remembering pain is the same as learning from it, as if growth isn't real unless it's comfortable. Once failure becomes part of identity, it starts shaping behavior in invisible ways. You hesitate before speaking up. You over-prepare, then underperform because you're tense. You sabotage momentum by waiting for the right moment that never comes. You quit early so the loss feels controlled. You lower your expectations so disappointment doesn't hurt as much. And every time you do this, failure tightens its grip. Not because you failed again, but because you obeyed. The identity it gave you, the most dangerous thing about identity-based failure is that it feels logical. You tell yourself you're being cautious, mature, self-aware. But what you're really doing is letting an old wound dictate your future behavior. You don't trust yourself anymore, not because you're unreliable, but because you're still loyal to a version of you that didn't know better, that didn't have experience, that didn't have resilience, that didn't have scars yet. You judge your present self by the standards of your past weakness, and then wonder why confidence never returns. And here's the brutal truth. Identity doesn't change through insight alone. You can understand all of this and still feel stuck, because identity is not what you think. It's what you repeatedly act from. Every time you avoid risk, you reinforce the identity of someone who can't handle failure. Every time you stay silent, you reinforce the identity of someone whose voice doesn't matter. Every time you downplay a win, you reinforce the belief that success isn't real. The mind doesn't update identity through reflection. It updates it through evidence. If the only evidence you keep feeding it is avoidance, hesitation, and self-doubt, then failure stays loud, not because it's true, but because it's consistent. This is the point where many people get stuck for years, decades. They're not lazy. They're not incapable. They're misidentified. They confuse who they were at their lowest with who they are now. And until that confusion is confronted, no amount of motivation will stick. You can't build a future while dragging an old identity behind you. You can't move forward while mentally checking in with a past version of yourself for permission. Failure only becomes dangerous when you let it answer the question, "Who am I?" And unless that answer is challenged, it will keep speaking for you, even when you stay silent. All right, this is where it turns from, psychological to predictive. Most people think their future is shaped by ambition, discipline, or opportunity. It's not. It's shaped by what they avoid. And what they avoid is almost always connected to a past failure they never resolved. Failure doesn't just sit in memory, it becomes a filter. It quietly edits your choices before you're even aware a choice existed. You don't wake up and decide to limit yourself. You wake up and feel hesitation, resistance, something doesn't feel right. That feeling isn't intuition, it's memory wearing a disguise. Your mind takes one failed outcome and projects it forward like a forecast. This didn't work before, so it won't work again. But what it conveniently ignores is the most important variable: you are not the same person anymore. Different awareness, different experience, different strength. But the brain doesn't update automatically. It uses old data because old data feels safe, familiar, predictable. And predictability, even when painful, feels more controllable than uncertainty. So you start making decisions that look reasonable on the surface but are actually fear-driven at the core. You don't fully commit. You keep backup plans that weaken your focus. You leave emotional exits in case things go wrong. You tell yourself you're being smart, but really you're trying to avoid the emotional cost of another failure. And here's the trap. Half effort produces half results. And half results often fail. Not because you weren't capable, but because you never gave the future a fair chance. Then when it doesn't work, your mind says, "See, I told you." And the cycle tightens. Failure also chooses what you don't dream about anymore. Certain ambitions stop feeling realistic, not because they're impossible, but because trying for them would require facing uncertainty again. So you lower the ceiling. You aim for what feels manageable, acceptable, safe, and slowly the gap between what you want and what you settle for grows wider. That gap doesn't just cause regret, it creates quiet resentment toward yourself, a sense that you're living beneath your potential but don't know how to escape it. What makes this sabotage so dangerous is that it's invisible. No one sees it from the outside. You're functioning, you're surviving, you might even be doing okay, but inside there's a constant negotiation happening. Should I try? Should I risk it? What if it goes wrong again? And most of the time the answer is silence. Delay, distra. Cixian. You don't fail loudly anymore. You fail by not fully showing up. And that kind of failure is harder to detect because it doesn't hurt immediately. It just steals momentum slowly. Your past failures also affect how you interpret new information. Feedback feels like judgment. Neutral comments feel like criticism. Small setbacks feel catastrophic because your nervous system is already primed for threat. You're not reacting to the present moment. You're reacting to the emotional residue of the past. And because of that, you make future decisions defensively instead of creatively. You optimize for not losing instead of for winning. And a life built around not losing will never feel like winning. This is how failure controls your future without announcing itself. It doesn't say don't try. It says be careful, wait, maybe later, now. And those words sound responsible, mature, sensible. But over time, they quietly erase possibility. And one day you look back and realize the future you feared never happened, but neither did the future you wanted. The most painful realization isn't that you failed in the past. It's realizing that past failure has been making your decisions for you ever since. Failure only stays loud when it ice unprocessed. Not because it was big, but because it was never finished. Most people don't move on from failure. They drag it forward, unresolved, unanswered, still asking the same question over and over, what does this say about me? And as long as that question stays unanswered, failure keeps speaking. The mind doesn't want closure. It wants meaning. And when you don't consciously assign meaning to failure, your brain assigns one for you. Usually the cruelest one, the first shift that quiets failure is realizing this: failure is data, not identity. It is information about a moment, not a verdict about a person. The event happened once. The interpretation is what keeps happening, and interpretations can be changed. The version of you who failed was operating with less experience, less awareness, less emotional regulation, less context. Judging your current self by that moment is like judging a skilled adult by a childhood mistake. But the mind doesn't update that automatically. You have to force the update. You do that by revisiting failure without emotion. Not reliving it, reviewing it. What did it teach you? What blind spots did it expose? What skills did it force you to build? What strengths did it reveal that you didn't know you had? Survival itself is evidence. Endurance is evidence. Adaptation is evidence. But most people never count those because they only count outcomes. When you start counting growth, failure loses its moral weight. It stops being a judgment, starts becoming a lesson. The second shift is reclaiming your wins, deliberately, not casually, not dismissively. Your wins don't need applause, they need recognition. You have to sit with them long enough for your nervous system to register safety, completion, capability. You don't rush past them. You don't minimize them. You let them land. Because confidence is not hype, it's familiarity with your own competence. And that familiarity only comes when you let success stay long enough to rewrite memory. Then comes the hardest part, acting before confidence returns. Most people wait until they feel ready. That day rarely comes. Confidence is a consequence of action, not a prerequisite. The moment you act in spite of fear, you send your brain a new signal: I can survive uncertainty. That signal weakens the grip of past failure more than any affirmation ever could. Each small act of courage adds new data, new evidence. And slowly the past stops being the loudest voice in the room. This doesn't mean failure disappears. It just loses authority. It becomes background noise instead of a command, a reference instead of a ruler. You stop asking it for permission. You stop negotiating with. You move forward with it watching, not leading, and that's the real victory. Not never failing again, but refusing to let failure decide who you are or where you go. Your past failures feel louder than your past wins because you kept listening to them, not because they were more true, but because they were never challenged. And the moment you stop letting the past speak for you, the future finally gets a voice.